Alexandre Dumas, The Man in the Iron Mask. Chapter 32. Captive and Jailers. When they had entered the fort, and whilst the governor was making some preparations for the reception of his guests, "Come," said Athos, "let us have a word of explanation whilst we are alone." "It is simply this," replied the Musketeer. "I have conducted hither a prisoner who the king commands shall not be seen. You came here. He has thrown something to you through the lattice of his window. I was at dinner with the governor. I saw the object thrown, and I saw Raoul pick it up. It does not take long to understand this. I understood it, and I thought you in intelligence with my prisoner. And then you commanded us to be shot." "Ma foi, I admit it, but if I was the first to seize the musket, fortunately I was the last to take aim at you." "If you had killed me, D'Artagnan, I should have had the good fortune to die for the royal house of France, and it would be an honor to die by your hand, you, its noblest and most loyal defender." "What the devil, Athos, do you mean by the royal house?" stammered D'Artagnan. "You don't mean that you, a well-informed and sensible man, can place any faith in the nonsense written by an idiot?" "I do believe in it." "With so much more the reason, my dear Chevalier, from your having orders to kill all those who do believe in it," said Raoul. "That is because," replied the captain of the Musketeers, "because every calumny, however absurd it may be, has the almost certain chance of becoming popular." "No, D'Artagnan," replied Athos promptly, "but because the king is not willing that the secret of his family should transpire among the people and cover with shame the executioners of the son of Louis XIII. "Do not talk in such a childish manner, Athos, or I shall begin to think you have lost your senses. Besides, explain to me how it is possible Louis XIII should have a son in the Isle of Sainte Marguerite." "A son whom you have brought hither masked in a fishing boat," said Athos. "Why not?" D'Artagnan was brought to a pause. "Oh," said he, "whence do you know that a fishing boat brought you to Sainte Marguerite with the carriage containing the prisoner, with a prisoner whom you styled Monseigneur?" "Oh, I am acquainted with all that," resumed the Comte. D'Artagnan bit his moustache. "If it were true," said he, "that I brought hither in a boat and with a carriage a masked prisoner, nothing proves that this prisoner must be a prince of the house of France." "Ask Aramis such riddles," replied Athos, coolly. "Aramis?" cried the Musketeer, quite at a stand. "Have you seen Aramis?" "After his discomfiture at Vaux, yes, I have seen Aramis, a fugitive, pursued, bewildered, ruined. And Aramis has told me enough to make me believe in the complaints this unfortunate young prince cut upon the bottom of the plate." D'Artagnan's head sunk on his breast in some confusion. "This is the way," said he, "in which God turns to nothing that which men call wisdom. A fine secret must that be of which 12 or 15 persons hold the tattered fragments. Athos, cursed be the chance which has brought you face to face with me in this affair, for now." "Well," said Athos, with his customary mild severity, "is your secret lost because I know it? Consult your memory, my friend. Have I not borne secrets heavier than this?" "You have never borne one so dangerous," replied D'Artagnan in a tone of sadness. "I have something like a sinister idea that all who are concerned with this secret will die, and die unhappily." "The will of God be done," said Athos. "But here is your governor." D'Artagnan and his friends immediately resumed their parts. The governor, suspicious and hard, behaved towards D'Artagnan with a politeness almost amounting to obsequiousness. With respect to the travelers, he contented himself with offering good cheer and never taking his eye from them. Athos and Raoul observed that he often tried to embarrass them by sudden attacks, or to catch them off their guard, but neither the one nor the other gave him the least advantage. What D'Artagnan had said was probable, if the governor did not believe it to be quite true. They rose from the table to repose for a while. "What is this man's name? I don't like the looks of him," said Athos to D'Artagnan in Spanish. "De Saint Mars," replied the captain. "He is, then, I suppose, the prince's jailer?" How can I tell? I may be kept at Sainte Marguerite forever." "Oh, no, not you." "My friend, I am in the situation of a man who finds a treasure in the midst of a desert. He would like to carry it away, but he cannot. He would like to leave it, but he dares not. The king will not dare to recall me, for no one else would serve him as faithfully as I do. He regrets not having me near him, from being aware that no one would be of so much service near his person as myself, but it will happen as it may please God." "But," observed Raoul, "your not being certain proves that your situation here is provisional, and you will turn to Paris?" Ask these gentlemen," interrupted the governor, "what was their purpose in coming to Sainte Marguerite." "They came from learning there was a convent of Benedictines at Saint Honorat, which is considered curious, and from being told there was an excellent shooting in the island." "That is quite at their service, as well as yours," replied Saint Mars. D'Artagnan politely thanked him. "When will they depart?" added the governor. "Tomorrow," replied D'Artagnan. Monsieur de Saint Mars went to make his rounds and left D'Artagnan alone with the pretended Spaniards. "Oh!" exclaimed the Musketeer, "here is a life and a society that suits me very little. I command this man, and he bores me. Mordieu! Come, let us have a shot or two at the rabbits. The walk will be beautiful and not fatiguing. The whole island is but a league and a half in length, and the breadth of a league, a real park. Let us try to amuse ourselves." "As you please, D'Artagnan, not for the sake of amusing ourselves, but to gain an opportunity for talking freely." D'Artagnan made a sign to a soldier, who brought the gentleman some guns, and then returned to the fort. "And now," said the Musketeer, "answer me the question put to you by that black-looking Saint Mars. What did you come to do at the Léron Isles?" "To bid you farewell." "Bid me farewell? What do you mean by that? Is Raoul going anywhere?" "Yes." "Then I will lay a wager it is with Monsieur de Beaufort." "With Monsieur de Beaufort it is, my dear friend. You always guess correctly." "From habit." Whilst the two friends were commencing their conversation, Raoul, with his head hanging down and his heart oppressed, seated himself on a mossy rock, his gun across his knees, looking at the sea, looking at the heavens, and listening to the voice of his soul. He allowed the sportsman to attain a considerable distance from him. D'Artagnan remarked his absence. "Has he not recovered the blow?" he said to Athos. "He is struck to death." "Oh, 4 years exaggerate, I hope. Raoul is of a tempered nature. Around all hearts as noble as his there is a second envelope that forms a cuirass. The first bleeds, the second resists." "No," replied Athos, "Raoul will die of it." "Mordieu!" said D'Artagnan in a melancholy tone, and he did not add a word to this exclamation. Then, after a minute after, "Why do you let him go?" "Because he insists on going." "And why do you not go with him?" "Because I cannot bear to see him die." D'Artagnan looked his friend earnestly in the face. "You know one thing," continued the Comte, leaning upon the arm of the captain. "You know that in the course of my life I have been afraid of but few things. Well, I have an incessant, gnawing, insurmountable fear that an hour will come in which I shall hold the dead body of that boy in my arms." "Oh," murmured D'Artagnan. "Oh." "He will die, I know. I have a perfect conviction of that. But I would not see him die." "How is this, Athos? You come and place yourself in the presence of the bravest man you say you have ever seen, of your own D'Artagnan, of that man without an equal, as you formerly called him, and you come and tell him, with your arms folded, that you are afraid of witnessing the death of your son, you, who have seen all that can be seen in this world. Why have you this fear, Athos? Man upon this earth must expect everything, and ought to face everything. Listen to me, my friend. After having worn myself out upon this earth of which you speak, I have preserved but two religions, that of life, friendship, my duty as a father, that of eternity, love, and respect for God. Now I have within me the revelation that if God should decree that my friend or my son should render up his last sigh in my presence, oh, no, I cannot even tell you, D'Artagnan. Speak, tell me. I am strong against everything except against the death of those I love. For that only there is no remedy. He who dies gains. He who sees others die, loses. No, if this is it, to know that I should no more meet on earth him who I now behold with joy, to know that there would nowhere be a D'Artagnan any more, nowhere again be a Raoul. Oh, I am old. Look you, I have no longer courage. I pray God to spare me in my weakness, but if he struck me so plainly and in that fashion, I should curse him. A Christian gentleman ought not to curse his God, D'Artagnan. It is enough to once have cursed a king. Humph, sighed D'Artagnan, a little confused by this violent tempest of grief. Let me speak to him, Athos. Who knows? Try if you please, but I am convinced you will not succeed. I will not attempt to console him. I will serve him. You will? Doubtless I will. Do you think this would be the first time a woman had repented of an infidelity? I will go to him, I tell you. Athos shook his head and continued his walk alone. D'Artagnan, cutting across the brambles, rejoined Raoul and held out his hand to him. Well, Raoul, you have something to say to me? I have a kindness to ask of you, replied Bragelonne. Ask it, then. You will some day return to France? I hope so. Ought I to write Mademoiselle de la Valliere? No, you must not. But I have many things to say to her. Go and say them to her, then. Never. Pray, what virtue do you attribute to a letter which your speech might not possess? Perhaps you are right. She loves the king, said D'Artagnan bluntly, and she is an honest girl. Raoul started. And you, whom she abandons, she, perhaps, loves better than she does the king, but after another fashion. D'Artagnan, do you believe she loves the king? To idolatry. Her heart is inaccessible to any other feelings. You might continue to live near her, and would be her best friend. Ah! Exclaimed Raoul, with a passionate burst of repugnance at such a hideous hope. Will you do so? It would be base. That is a very absurd word, which would lead me to think slightly of your understanding. Please to understand, Raoul, that it is never base to do that which is imposed upon us by a superior force. If your heart says to you, go there or die, why go, Raoul. Was she base or brave, she whom you loved, in preferring the king to you, the king whom commanded her imperiously to prefer to you? No, she was the bravest of women. Do then as she has done. Oblige yourself. Do you know one thing of which I am sure, Raoul? What is that? Why, that by seeing her closely with the eyes of a jealous man, well, you would cease to love her. Then I am decided, my dear D'Artagnan, to set off to see her again. No, to set off that I may never see her again. I wish to love her forever. Ah, I must confess, replied the musketeer, that is a conclusion which I was far from expecting. This is what I wish, my friend. You will see her again, and you will give her a letter which, if you think proper, will explain to her as to yourself what is passing in my heart. Read it. I drew it up last night. Something told me I should see you today. He held the letter out, and D'Artagnan read, Mademoiselle, you are not wrong in my eyes in not loving me. You have only been guilty of one fault towards me, that of having left me to believe you loved me. This error will cost me my life. I pardon you, but I cannot pardon myself. It is said that happy lovers are deaf to the sorrows of rejected lovers. It will not be so with you, who did not love me, save with anxiety. I am sure that if I had persisted in endeavoring to change that friendship into love, you would have yielded out of a fear of bringing about my death, or lessening the esteem I had for you. It is much more delightful to me to die, knowing that you are free and satisfied. How much, then, will you love me when you will no longer fear either my presence or reproaches? You will love me because, however charming a new love may appear to you, God has not made me in anything inferior to him you have chosen. And because my devotedness, my sacrifice, and my painful end will assure me, in your eyes, a certain superiority over him, I have allowed to escape in the candid credulity of my heart the treasure I possess. Many people tell me that you loved me enough to lead me to hope you would have loved me much. That idea takes from my mind all bitterness and leads me only to blame myself. You will accept this last farewell, and you will bless me for having taken refuge in the inviolable asylum where hatred is extinguished, and where all love endures forever. Adieu, mademoiselle. If your happiness could be purchased by the last drop of my blood, I would shed that drop. I willingly make the sacrifice of it to my misery. Raoul, Vicomte de Bragelonne. The letter reads very well, said the captain. I have only one fault to find with it. Tell me what that is, said Raoul. Why, it is that it tells everything except the thing which exhales like a mortal poison from your eyes and from your heart, except the senseless love which still consumes you. Raoul grew paler, but remained silent. Why did you not write simply these words? Mademoiselle, instead of cursing you, I love you and I die. That is true, exclaimed Raoul with a sinister kind of joy, and tearing the letter he had just taken back, he wrote the following words upon a leaf of his tablet. To procure the happiness of once more telling you I love you, I commit the baseness of writing to you, and to punish myself for that baseness, I die. And he signed it. You will give her these tablets, Captain, will you not? When? Asked the latter. On the day, said Bragelonne, pointing to the last sentence. On the day when you can place a date under these words, and he sprang away quickly to join Athos, who was returning with slow steps. As they re-entered the fort, the sea rose with that rapid, gusty vehemence which characterizes the Mediterranean. The ill humor of the element became a tempest. Something shapeless and tossed about violently by the waves, appeared just off the coast. What is that? What is that? Said Athos. A wrecked boat? No, it is not a boat, said D'Artagnan. Pardon me, said Raoul. There is a bark gaining the port rapidly. Yes, there is a bark in the creek, which is prudently seeking shelter there. But that which Athos points to in the sand is not a boat at all. It has run aground. Yes, I see it. It is the carriage which I threw into the sea after landing the prisoner. Well, said Athos, if you take my advice, D'Artagnan, you will burn that carriage in order that no vestige of it may remain. Without which the fishermen of Antibes, who have believed they had to do with the devil, will endeavor to prove that your prisoner was but a man. Your advice is good, Athos, and I will this night have it carried out, or rather, I will carry it out myself. But let us go in, for the rain falls heavily, and the lightning is terrific. As they were passing over the ramparts to a gallery of which D'Artagnan had the key, they saw Monsieur de Saint-Mars directing his steps toward the chamber inhabited by the prisoner. Upon a sign from D'Artagnan, they concealed themselves in an angle of the staircase. What is it? Said Athos. You will see. Look, the prisoner is returning from chapel. And they saw, by the red flashes of lightning against the violet fog which the wind stamped upon the bankward sky, They saw pass gravely at 6 paces behind the governor a man clothed in black and masked by a visor of polished steel, soldered to a helmet of the same nature, which altogether enveloped the whole of his head. The fire of the heavens cast red reflections on the polished surface, and these reflections, flying off capriciously, seemed to be angry looks launched by the unfortunate instead of imprecations. In the middle of the gallery the prisoner stopped for a moment to contemplate the infinite horizon, to respire the sulphurous perfumes of the tempest, to drink in thirstily the hot rain, and to breathe a sigh resembling a smothered groan. "Come on, monsieur," said Saint Mars sharply to the prisoner, for he already became uneasy at seeing him look so long beyond the walls. "Monsieur, come on." "Say, monseigneur," cried Athos from his corner, with a voice so solemn and terrible that the governor trembled from head to foot. Athos insisted upon respect being paid to fallen majesty. The prisoner turned around. "Who spoke?" asked Saint Mars. "It was I," replied D'Artagnan, showing himself promptly. "You know that is the order." "Call me neither monsieur nor monseigneur," said the prisoner in his turn in a voice that penetrated to the very soul of Raoul. "Call me accursed." He passed on, and the iron door croaked after him. "There goes a truly unfortunate man," murmured the musketeer in a hollow whisper, pointing out to Raoul the chamber inhabited by the prince. Chapter 33. Promises. Scarcely had D'Artagnan re-entered his apartment with his 2 friends, when one of the soldiers of the fort came to inform him that the governor was seeking him. The bark which Raoul had perceived at sea, and which appeared so eager to gain the port, came to Sainte Marguerite with an important dispatch for the captain of the musketeers. Opening it, D'Artagnan recognized the writing of the king. "I should think," said Louis XIV, "you will have completed the execution of my orders, Monsieur D'Artagnan. Return, then, immediately to Paris, and join me at the Louvre." "There is the end of my exile," cried the musketeer with joy. "God be praised, I am no longer a jailer." And he showed the letter to Athos. "So, then, you must leave us?" replied the latter in a melancholy tone. "Yes, but to meet again, dear friend, seeing that Raoul is old enough now to go alone with Monsieur de Beaufort, and will prefer his father going back in company with Monsieur d'Artagnan, to forcing him to travel 200 leagues solitarily to reach home at La Fère. Will you not, Raoul?" "Certainly," stammered the latter with an expression of tender regret. "No, no, my friend," interrupted Athos. "I will never quit Raoul till the day his vessel disappears on the horizon. As long as he remains in France, he shall not be separated from me." "As you please, dear friend, but we will, at least, leave Sainte Marguerite together. Take advantage of the bark that will convey me back to Antibes." "With all my heart. We cannot too soon be at a distance from this fort and from the spectacle that shocked us so just now." The 3 friends quitted the little isle, after paying their respects to the governor, and by the last flashes of the departing tempest they took their farewell of the white walls of the fort. D'Artagnan parted from his friends that same night, after having seen fire set to the carriage upon the shore by the orders of Saint Mars, according to the advice the captain had given him. Before getting on horseback, and after leaving the arms of Athos, "My friends," said he, "you bear too much resemblance to the 2 soldiers who are abandoning their post. Something warns me that Raoul will require being supported by you in his rank. Will you allow me to ask permission to go over into Africa with 100 good muskets? The king will not refuse me, and I will take you with me." "Monsieur d'Artagnan," replied Raoul, pressing his hand with emotion, "thanks for that offer, which would give us more than we wish, either Monsieur le Comte or I. I, who am young, stand in need of labor of mind and fatigue of body. Monsieur le Comte wants the profoundest repose. You are his best friend. I recommend him to your care. In watching over him, you are holding both our souls in your hands." "I must go. my horse is all in a fret," said D'Artagnan, with whom the most magnificent sign of a lively emotion was the change of ideas and conversation. "Come, Comte, how many days longer has Raoul to stay here?" 3 days at most. "And how long will it take you to reach home?" "Oh, a considerable time," replied Athos. "I shall not like the idea of being separated too quickly from Raoul. Time will travel too fast of itself to require me to aid it by distance. I shall only make half stages." "And why so, my friend? Nothing is more dull than traveling slowly, and hostelry life does not become a man like you." "My friend, I came hither on post horses, but I wish to purchase 2 animals of a superior kind. Now, to take them home fresh, it would not be prudent to make them travel more than 7 or 8 leagues a day." "Where is Grimaud?" "He arrived yesterday morning with Raoul's appointments, and I have left him to sleep." "That is, never to come back again." D'Artagnan suffered to escape him. "Till we meet again, then, dear Athos, and if you are diligent, I shall embrace you the sooner." So saying, he put his foot in the stirrup, which Raoul held. "Farewell," said the young man, embracing him. "Farewell," said D'Artagnan, as he got into his saddle. His horse made a movement which divided the cavalier from his friends. This scene had taken place in front of the house chosen by Athos, near the gates of Antibes, whither D'Artagnan, after his supper, had ordered his horses to be brought. The road began to branch off there, white and undulating in the vapors of the night. The horse eagerly respired the salt, sharp perfume of the marshes. D'Artagnan put him to a trot, and Athos and Raoul sadly turned towards the house. All at once they heard the rapid approach of a horse's steps, and first believed it to be one of those singular repercussions which deceive the ear at every turn in a road, but it was really the return of a horseman. They uttered a cry of joyous surprise, and the captain, springing to the ground like a young man, seized within his arms the 2 beloved heads of Athos and Raoul. He held them long embraced thus, without speaking a word, or suffering the sigh which was bursting his breast to escape him. Then, as rapidly as he had come back, he set off again, with a sharp application of his spurs to the sides of his fiery horse. "Alas," said the Comte in a low voice, "alas, alas!" "An evil omen on his side," said D'Artagnan to himself, making up for lost time. "I could not smile upon them. An evil omen." The next day Grimaud was on foot again. The service commanded by M. de Beaufort was happily accomplished. The flotilla sent to Toulon by the exertions of Raoul had set out, dragging after it in little nutshells, almost invisible, the wives and friends of the fishermen and smugglers put in requisition for the service of the fleet. The time, so short, which remained for father and son to live together, appeared to go by with double rapidity, like some swift stream that flows towards eternity. Athos and Raoul returned to Toulon, which began to be filled with the noise of carriages, with the noise of arms, the noise of neighing horses. The trumpeters sounded their spirited marches, the drummers signalized their strength. The streets were overflowing with soldiers, servants, and tradespeople. The Duc de Beaufort was everywhere, superintending the embarkation with the zeal and interest of a good captain. He encouraged the humblest of his companions. He scolded his lieutenants, even those of the highest rank. Artillery provisions, baggage, he insisted upon seeing all himself. He examined the equipment of every soldier, assured himself of the health and soundness of every horse. It was plain that light, boastful, egotistical in his hotel, the gentleman became the soldier again, the high noble, a captain, in face of the responsibility he accepted. And yet it must be admitted that whenever was the care with which he presided over the preparations for departure, it was easy to perceive careless precipitation and the absence of all the precaution that make the French soldier the first soldier in the world, because in that world he is the one most abandoned to his own physical and moral resources. All things having satisfied, or appearing to have satisfied, the admiral, he paid his compliments to Raoul and gave the last orders for sailing. which was ordered the next morning at daybreak. He invited the Comte and his son to dine with him, but they, under a pretext of service, kept themselves apart. Gaining their hostelry, situated under the trees of the great place, they took their repast in haste, and Athos led Raoul to the rocks which dominate the city, vast grey mountains whence the view is infinite and embraces a liquid horizon, which appears, so remote is it, on a level with the rocks themselves. The night was fine, as it always is in these happy climes. The moon, rising behind the rocks, unrolled a silver sheet on the cerulean carpet of the sea. In the roadsteads maneuvered silently the vessels which had just taken their rank to facilitate the embarkation. The sea, loaded with phosphoric light, opened beneath the hulls of the barks that transported the baggage and the munitions. Every dip of the prow ploughed up this gulf of white flames. From every oar dropped liquid diamonds. The sailors, rejoicing in the largesse of the admiral, were heard murmuring their slow and artless songs. Sometimes the grinding of the chains was mixed with the dull noise of shot falling into the holds. Such harmonies, such a spectacle, oppressed the heart like fear, and dilated like hope. All this life speaks of death. Athos had seated himself with his son upon the moss, among the brambles of the promontory. Around their heads, passed and repassed large bats carried along by the fearful whirl of their blind chase. The feet of Raoul were over the edge of the cliff, bathed in that void which is peopled by vertigo and provokes to self-annihilation. When the moon had risen to its fullest height, caressing with light the neighboring peaks, when the watery mirror was illuminated in its full extent, and the little red fires had made their openings in the black masses of every ship, Athos, collecting all his ideas and all his courage, said, "God has made all these things that we see, Raoul. He has made us also, poor atoms mixed up with this monstrous universe. We shine like those fires and those stars. We sigh like those waves. We suffer like those great ships which are worn out in plowing the waves, and obeying the wind that urges them toward the end, as the breath of God blows us towards a port. Everything likes to live, Raoul, and everything seems beautiful to living things." "Monsieur," said Raoul, "we have before us a beautiful spectacle." "How good D'Artagnan is," interrupted Athos suddenly, "and what a rare good fortune it is to be supported during a whole life by such a friend as he is. That is what you have missed, Raoul." "A friend!" cried Raoul. "I have wanted a friend." "Monsieur de Guiche is an agreeable companion," resumed the Comte coldly, "but I believe in the times in which you live men are more engaged in their own interests and their own pleasures than they were in ours. You have sought a secluded life, that is a great happiness, but you have lost your strength thereby. We four, more weaned from those delicate abstractions that constitute your joy, furnished much more resistance when misfortune presented itself. I have not interrupted you, monsieur, to tell you that I had a friend, and that friend is Monsieur de Guiche. Certes, he is a good and generous, and moreover he loves me, but I have lived under the guardianship of another friendship, monsieur, as precious and as strong as that of which you speak, since it is yours." "I have not been a friend for you, Raoul," said Athos. "Eh, monsieur, and in what respect not?" "Because I have given you reason to think that life has but one face, because, sad and severe, alas, I have always cut off for you, without, God knows, wishing to do so, the joyous buds that spring incessantly from the fair tree of youth, so that at this moment I repent of not having made you a more expansive, dissipated, animated man." "I know why you say that, monsieur. No, it is not you who have made me what I am. It was love, which took me at the time when children only have inclinations. It is the constancy natural to my character, which other creatures is but habit. I believed that I should always be as I was. I thought God had cast me in a path quite clear, quite straight. bordered with fruits and flowers. I had ever watching over me your vigilance and strength. I believed myself to be vigilant and strong. Nothing prepared me. I fell once, and that once deprived me of courage for the whole of my life. It is quite true that I wrecked myself. Oh no, monsieur, you are nothing in my past, but happiness, in my future, but hope. No, I have no reproach to make against life such as you made it for me. I bless you, and I love you ardently. My dear Raoul, your words do me good. They prove to me that you will act a little for me in the time to come. I shall act only for you, monsieur. Raoul, what I have never hitherto done with respect to you, I will henceforward do. I will be your friend, not your father. We will live in expanding ourselves instead of living and holding ourselves prisoners. When you come back, and that will be soon, will it not? Certainly, monsieur, for such an expedition cannot last long. Soon, then, Raoul, soon, instead of living moderately on my income, I will give you the capital of my estates. It will suffice for launching you into the world till my death, and you will give me, I hope, before that time, the consolation of not seeing my race extinct. I will do all that you may command, said Raoul, much agitated. It is not necessary, Raoul, that your duty as aide-de-camp should lead you into too hazardous enterprises. You've gone through your ordeal. You are known to be a true man under fire. Remember that war with Arabs is a war of snares, ambuscades, and assassinations. So it is said, monsieur. There is never much glory in falling in an ambuscade. It is a death which always implies a little rashness or want of foresight. Often, indeed, he who falls in one meets with but little pity. Those who are not pitied, Raoul, have died to little purpose. Still further, the conqueror laughs, and we Frenchmen ought not to allow stupid infidels to triumph over our faults. Do you clearly understand what I am saying to you, Raoul? God forbid I should encourage you to avoid encounters. I am naturally prudent, monsieur, and I have very good fortune, said Raoul with a smile which chilled the heart of his poor father. For, the young man hastened to add, in 20 combats through which I have been, I have only received one scratch. There is an addition, said Athos, the climate to be dreaded. That is an ugly end, to die of fever. King St. Louis prayed to God to send him an arrow or the plague, rather than a fever. Oh, monsieur, with sobriety, with reasonable exercise, I have already obtained from Monsieur de Beaufort a promise that his dispatches shall be sent off every fortnight to France. You, as his aide-de-camp, will be charged with expediting them, and will be sure not to forget me. No, monsieur, said Raoul, almost choked with emotion. Besides, Raoul, as you are a good Christian and I am one also, we ought to reckon upon a more special protection of God and his guardian angels. Promise me that if anything evil should happen to you on any occasion, you will think of me at once. First and at once, oh yes, monsieur. And will call upon me? Instantly. You dream of me sometimes, do you not, Raoul? Every night, monsieur. During my early youth I saw you in my dreams, calm and mild, with one hand stretched out over my head, and that it was which made me sleep so soundly formerly. We love each other deeply. We love each other too dearly, said the Comte, that from this moment in which we separate, a portion of both our souls should not travel with one and the other of us, and should not dwell wherever we may dwell. Whenever you may be sad, Raoul, I feel that my heart will be dissolved in sadness. And when you smile on thinking of me, be assured you will send me, from however remote a distance, a vital scintillation of your joy. I will not promise you to be joyous, replied the young man, but you may be certain that I will never pass an hour without thinking of you, not 1 hour, I swear, unless I shall be dead. Athos could contain himself no longer. He threw his arm around the neck of his son and held him embraced with all the power of his heart. The moon began to be now eclipsed by twilight. A golden band surrounded the horizon, announcing the approach of day. Athos threw his cloak over the shoulders of Raoul and led him back to the city, where burdens and porters were already in motion. like a vast ant-hill. At the extremity of the plateau, which Athos and Bragelonne were quitting, they saw a dark shadow moving uneasily backwards and forwards, as if in indecision or ashamed to be seen. It was Grimaud, who in his anxiety had tracked his master, and was there awaiting him. "Oh, my good Grimaud!" cried Raoul, "what do you want? You are come to tell us it is time to be gone, have you not?" "Alone?" said Grimaud, addressing Athos and pointing to Raoul in a tone of reproach, which showed to what an extent the old man was troubled. "Oh, you are right," cried the Comte. "No, Raoul shall not go alone. No, he shall not be left alone in a strange land without some friendly hand to support him, some friendly heart to recall to him all he loved." "I?" said Grimaud. "Yes, you," cried Raoul, touched to the inmost heart. "Alas," said Athos, "you are very old, my good Grimaud." "So much the better," replied the latter with an inexpressible depth of feeling and intelligence. "But the embarkation is begun," said Raoul, "and you are not prepared." "Yes," said Grimaud, showing the keys of his trunks mixed with those of his young master. "But," again objected Raoul, "you cannot leave Monsieur le Comte thus alone. Monsieur le Comte, whom you have never quitted?" Grimaud turned his diamond eyes upon Athos and Raoul as if to measure the strength of both. The Comte uttered not a word. "Monsieur le Comte prefers my going," said Grimaud. "I do," said Athos by an inclination of the head. At that moment the drums suddenly rolled, and the clarions filled the air with their inspiring notes. The regiments destined for the expedition began to debouch from the city. They advanced to the number of 5, each composed of 40 companies. Royals marched first, distinguished by their white uniform faced with blue. The ordnance colors, quartered crosswise, violet and dead leaf, with a sprinkling of golden fleur-de-lis, left the white-colored flag with its fleur-de-lis crossed to dominate the whole. Musketeers at the wings with their forked sticks and their muskets on their shoulders, pikemen in the center with their lances 14 feet in length, marched gaily toward the transports, which carried them in detail to the ships. The regiments of Picardy, Navarre, Normandy, and Royal Vaisseau followed after. Monsieur de Beaufort had known well how to select his troops. He himself was seen closing the march with his staff. It would take a full hour before he could reach the sea. Raoul, with Athos, turned his steps slowly toward the beach, in order to take his place when the prince embarked. Grimaud, boiling with the ardor of a young man, superintended the embarkation of Raoul's baggage in the admiral's vessels. Athos, with his arm passed through that of the son he was about to lose, absorbed in melancholy meditation, was deaf to every noise around him. An officer came quickly towards them to inform Raoul that Monsieur de Beaufort was anxious to have him by his side. "Have the kindness to tell the prince," said Raoul, "that I request he will allow me this hour to enjoy the company of my father." "No, no," said Athos, "an aide-de-camp ought not thus to quit his general. Please to tell the prince, monsieur, that the Vicomte will join him immediately." The officer set off at a gallop. "Whether we part here or there," added the Comte, "it is no less a separation." He carefully brushed the dust from his son's coat and passed his hand over his hair as they walked along. "But, Raoul," said he, "you want money, and Monsieur de Beaufort's train will be splendid, and I am certain it will be agreeable to you to purchase horses and arms, which are very dear things in Africa. Now, as you are not actually in the service of the king or Monsieur de Beaufort, and are simply a volunteer, you must not reckon upon either pay or largesse. But I should not like you to want for anything at Gigeli. Here are 200 pistoles. If you would please me, Raoul, spend them." Raoul pressed the hand of his father, and at the turning of a street they saw Monsieur de Beaufort mounted on a magnificent white genet, which responded by graceful curvets to the applause of the women of the city. The duke called Raoul and held out his hand to the Comte. He spoke to him for some time with such a kindly expression that the heart of the poor father even felt a little comforted. It was, however, evident to both father and son that their walk amounted to nothing less than a punishment. There was a terrible moment, that at which, on quitting the sands of the shore, the soldiers and sailors exchanged the last kisses with their families and friends, a supreme moment in which, notwithstanding the clearness of the heavens, the warmth of the sun, of the perfumes of the air, and the rich life that was circulating in their veins, everything appeared black, everything bitter. Everything created doubts of Providence, nay, at the most, of God. It was customary for the admiral and his suite to embark last. The cannon waited to announce, with its formidable voice, that the leader had placed his foot on board his vessel. Athos, forgetful of both the admiral and the fleet, and of his own dignity as a strong man, opened his arms to his son and pressed him convulsively to his heart. "Accompany us on board," said the Duke, very much affected. "You will gain a good half-hour." "No," said Athos, "my farewell has been spoken. I do not wish to voice a second." "Then, Viscount, embark quickly," added the prince, wishing to spare the tears of these two men whose hearts were bursting, and tenderly, very much as Porthos might have done, he took Raoul in his arms and placed him in the boat, the oars of which, at a signal, immediately were dipped in the waves. He himself, forgetful of ceremony, jumped into his boat and pushed it off with a vigorous foot. "Adieu!" cried Raoul. Athos replied only by a sign, but he felt something burning on his hand. It was the respectful kiss of Grimaud, the last farewell of the faithful dog. This kiss given, Grimaud jumped from the step of the mole upon the stem of a two-oared yawl, which had just been taken in tow by a chaland served by 12 galley oars. Athos seated himself on the mole, stunned, deaf, abandoned. Every instant took from him one of the features, one of the shades of the pale face of his son. With his arms hanging down, his eyes fixed, his mouth open, he remained confounded with Raoul, in one same look, in one same thought, in one same stupor. The sea, by degrees, carried away boats and faces to that distance at which men become nothing but points, loves, but nothing but remembrances. Athos saw his son ascend the ladder of the admiral's ship. He saw him lean upon the rail of the deck and place himself in such a manner as to always be an object in the eye of his father. In vain the cannon thundered. In vain from the ship sounded the long and lordly tumult, responded to by immense acclamations from the shore. In vain did the noise deafen the ear of the father. The smoke obscured the cherished object of aspirations. Raoul appeared to him to the last moment, and the imperceptible atom, passing from black to pale, from pale to white, from white to nothing, disappeared for Athos. Disappeared very long after. To all the eyes of the spectators had disappeared both gallant ships and swelling sails. Towards midday, when the sun devoured space, and scarcely the tops of the masts dominated the incandescent limit of the sea, Athos perceived a soft aerial shadow rise and vanish as soon as seen. This was the smoke of a cannon, which M. de Beaufort ordered to be fired as a last salute to the coast of France. The point was buried in its turn beneath the sky, and Athos returned with slow and painful step to his deserted hostelry. Chapter 34. Among Women. D'Artagnan had not been able to hide his feelings from his friends so much as he would have wished. The stoical soldier, the impassive man-at-arms, overcome by fear and sad presentiments, had yielded for a few moments to human weakness. When, therefore, he had silenced his heart and calmed the agitation of his nerves, turning towards his lackey, a silent servant, always listening in order to obey the more promptly. "Rabaud," he said, "mind, we must travel 30 leagues a day." "At your pleasure, Captain," replied Rabaud. And from that moment D'Artagnan, accommodating his action to the pace of the horse, like a true centaur, gave up his thoughts to nothing, that is to say, to everything. He asked himself why the king had sent for him back, why the Iron Mask had thrown the silver plate at the feet of Raoul. As to the first subject, the reply was negative. He knew right well that the king's calling him was from necessity. He still further knew that Louis XIV must experience an imperious desire for a private conversation with one whom the possession of such a secret placed on a level with the highest powers of the kingdom. But as to say exactly what the king's wish was, D'Artagnan found himself completely at a loss. The musketeer had no doubts either upon the reason which had urged the unfortunate Philippe to reveal his character and birth. Philippe, buried forever beneath a mask of steel, exiled to a country where the men seemed little more than slaves of the elements. Philippe, deprived even of the society of D'Artagnan, who had loaded him with honors and delicate attentions, had nothing more to see than odious spectres in his world, and despair beginning to devour him. He poured himself forth in complaints, and in the belief that his revelations would raise up some avenger for him. The manner in which the musketeer had been near killing his two best friends, the destiny which had so strangely brought Athos to participate in the great state secret, the farewell of Raoul, the obscurity of the future which threatened to end in a melancholy death, all this threw D'Artagnan incessantly back on lamentable predictions and forebodings, which the rapidity of his pace did not dissipate, as it used to formerly do. D'Artagnan passed from these considerations to the remembrance of the proscribed Porthos and Aramis. He saw them both, fugitives, tracked, ruined, laborious architects of fortunes they had lost, and as the king called for his man of execution in hours of vengeance and malice, D'Artagnan trembled at the very idea of receiving some commission that would make his very soul bleed. Sometimes, ascending hills, when the winded horse breathed hard from his red nostrils and heaved his flanks, the captain, left to more freedom of thought, reflected on the prodigious genius of Aramis, a genius of acumen and intrigue, a match to which the Fronde and the Civil War had produced but twice. Soldier, priest, diplomatist, gallant, avaricious, cunning, Aramis had never taken the good things of this life except as stepping stones to rise to giddier ends. Generous in spirit, if not lofty in heart, he never did ill but for the sake of shining even yet more brilliantly. Toward the end of his career, at the moment of reaching the goal, like the patrician Fuscus, he had made a false step upon a plank and had fallen into the sea. But Porthos, good, harmless Porthos, to see Porthos hungry, to see Mousqueton without gold lace, imprisoned perhaps, to see Père France, Vercieu razed to the very stones, dishonored even to the timber, these were so many poignant griefs for D'Artagnan, and every time that one of these griefs struck him, he bounded like a horse at the sting of a gadfly beneath the vaults of foliage where he has sought shady shelter from the burning sun. Never was the man of spirit subjected to ennui. If his body was exposed to fatigue, never did the man of healthy body fail to find light. If he had something to engage his mind, D'Artagnan, riding fast, thinking as constantly, alighted from his horse in pairs, fresh and tender in his muscles as the athlete preparing for the gymnasium. The king did not expect him so soon, and had just departed for the chase towards Meudon. D'Artagnan, instead of riding after the king, as he would formerly have done, took off his boots, had a bath, and waited till his majesty should return, dusty and tired. He occupied the interval of 5 hours in taking, as people say, the air of the house, and in arming himself against all ill chances. He learned that the king, during the last fortnight, had been gloomy, that the queen mother was ill and much depressed, that Monsieur, the king's brother, was exhibiting a devotional turn, and that Madame had the vapors, and that Monsieur de Guiche was gone to one of his estates. He learned that Monsieur Colbert was radiant, that Monsieur Fouquet consulted a fresh physician every day, who still did not cure him, and that his principal complaint was one which physicians do not usually cure, unless they are political physicians. The king, D'Artagnan was told, behaved in the kindest manner to Monsieur Fouquet, and did not allow him to be ever out of his sight. But the superintendent, touched to the heart, like one of those fine trees a worm has punctured, was declining daily in spite of the royal smile, that son of court trees. D'Artagnan learned that Mademoiselle de la Valliere had become indispensable to the king, that the king, during his sporting excursions, if he did not take her with him, wrote to her frequently, no longer verses, but, which was much worse, prose, and that whole pages at a time. Thus, as the political Pleiad of the day said, the first king in the world was seen descending from his horse with an ardor beyond compare, and on the crown of his hat scrawling bombastic phrases, which Monsieur de Saint Aignan, aide-de-camp in perpetuity, carried to La Valliere at the risk of foundering his horses. During this time deer and pheasants were left to the free enjoyment of their nature, hunted so lazily that it was said the art of venery ran great risk of degenerating at the court of France. D'Artagnan then thought of the wishes of poor Raoul, of that desponding letter destined to a woman who passed her life in hoping, and as D'Artagnan loved to philosophize a little occasionally, he resolved to profit by the absence of the king to have a minute's talk with Mademoiselle de la Valliere. This was a very easy affair while the king was hunting. Louise was walking with some other ladies in one of the galleries of the Palais Royal, exactly where the captain of the musketeers had some guards to inspect. D'Artagnan did not doubt that if he could but open the conversation on Raoul, Louise might give him grounds for writing a consolatory letter to the poor exile. And hope, or at least consolation for Raoul, in the state of heart in which he had left him, was the sun, was life to two men who were very dear to our captain. He directed his course, therefore, to the spot where he knew he should find Mademoiselle de la Valliere. D'Artagnan found La Valliere the center of the circle. In her apparent solitude, the king's favorite received, like a queen, or more, perhaps, than the queen, a homage of which Madame had been so proud. When all the king's looks were directed to her and commanded the looks of the courtiers, D'Artagnan, although no squire of dames, received, nevertheless, civilities and attentions from the ladies. He was polite, as a brave man always is, and his terrible reputation had conciliated as much friendship among the men as admiration among the women. On seeing him enter, therefore, they immediately accosted him, and, as is not unfrequently the case with fair ladies, opened the attack by questions. Where had he been? What had become of him so long? Why had they not seen him as usual make his fine horse curvet in such a beautiful style, to the delight and astonishment of the curious from the king's balcony? He replied that he had just come from the land of oranges. This set all the ladies laughing. Those were times in which everybody traveled, but in which, notwithstanding, a journey of 100 leagues was a problem often solved by death. "From the land of oranges?" cried Mademoiselle de Tonnay-Charente. "From Spain?" "Eh, eh," said the musketeer. "From Malta? From Malta?" echoed Montalais. "Ma foi, you are coming very near, ladies." "Is it an island?" asked La Valliere. "Mademoiselle," said D'Artagnan, "I will not give you the trouble of seeking any further. I come from the country where Monsieur de Beaufort is, at this moment, embarking for Algiers." "Have you seen the army?" asked several warlike fair ones. "As plainly as I see you," replied D'Artagnan. "And the fleet?" "Yes, I saw everything." "Have we any of us any friends there?" said Mademoiselle de Tonnay-Charente, coldly, but in a manner to attract attention to a question that was not without its calculated aim. "Why," replied D'Artagnan, "yes, there was a Monsieur de la Goletière, Monsieur de Manchy, Monsieur de Bragelonne." La Valliere became pale. "Monsieur de Bragelonne?" cried the perfidious Athenais. "What, is he gone to the wars, he?" Montalais trod on her toe, but all in vain. Do you know what my opinion is? Continued she, addressing D'Artagnan. No, mademoiselle, but I should like very much to know it. My opinion is, then, that all the men who go to this war are desperate, desponding men, whom love has treated ill, and who go to try if they cannot find jet-complexioned women more kind than fair ones have been. Some of the ladies laughed. La Valliere was evidently confused. Montalais coughed loud enough to waken the dead. Mademoiselle, interrupted D'Artagnan, you are in error when you speak of black women at Gigelli. The women there have not jet faces. It is true they are not white. They are yellow. Yellow? Exclaimed the bevy of fair beauties. Do not disparage it. I have never seen a finer color to match with black eyes and a coral mouth. So much the better for Monsieur Bragelonne, said Mademoiselle de Tonnay-Charente, with persistent malice. He will make amends for his loss, poor fellow. A profound silence followed these words, and D'Artagnan had time to observe and reflect that women, mild doves, treat each other more cruelly than tigers. But making La Valliere pale did not satisfy Athénais. She determined to make her blush likewise. Resuming the conversation without pause, "Do you know, Louise," said she, "that there is a great sin on your conscience?" "What sin, mademoiselle?" stammered the unfortunate girl, looking round her for support, without finding it. Why?" continued Athénais. "The poor young man was affianced to you. He loved you. You cast him off." "Well, that is a right which every honest woman has," said Montalais in an affected tone. "When we know we cannot constitute the happiness of a man, it is much better to cast him off." "Cast him off or refuse him, that's all very well," said Athénais. "But that is not the sin Mademoiselle de la Valliere has to reproach herself with. The actual sin is sending poor Bragelonne to the wars, and to wars in which death is so very likely to be met with." Louise pressed her hand over her icy brow. "And if he dies," continued her pitiless tormentor, "you will have killed him. That is the sin." Louise, half dead, caught at the arm of the captain of the musketeers, whose face betrayed unusual emotion. "You wished to speak with me, Monsieur d'Artagnan?" said she, in a voice broken by anger and pain. "What had you to say to me?" D'Artagnan made several steps along the gallery, holding Louise on his arm. Then, when they were far enough removed from the others, "What I had to say to you, mademoiselle," replied he, "Mademoiselle de Tonnay-Charente has just expressed, roughly and entirely unkindly, but it is still true." She uttered a faint cry, pierced to the heart by this new wound. She went her way like one of those poor birds which, struck unto death, seek the shade of the thicket in which to die. She disappeared at one door, and at the moment the king was entering by another. The first glance of the king was directed toward the empty seat of his mistress. Not perceiving La Valliere, a frown came over his brow, but as soon as he saw D'Artagnan, who bowed to him, "Ah, monsieur," cried he, "you have been diligent. I am much pleased with you." This was the superlative expression of royal satisfaction. Many men would have been ready to lay down their lives for such a speech from the king. The maids of honor and the courtiers, who had formed a respectful circle around the king on his entrance, drew back on observing he wished to speak privately with his captain of the musketeers. The king led the way out of the gallery, after having again, with his eyes, sought everywhere for La Valliere, whose absence he could not account for. The moment they were out of the reach of curious ears, "Well, Monsieur d'Artagnan," said he, "the prisoner?" "Is in his prison, sire." "What did he say on the road?" "Nothing, sire." "What did he do?" "There was a moment at which the fisherman who took me in his boat to Sainte Marguerite revolted, and did his best to kill me. The prisoner defended me instead of attempting to fly." The king became pale. "Enough," he said, and D'Artagnan bowed. Louis walked about his cabinet with hasty steps. "Were you at Antibes," he said, "when Monsieur de Beaufort came there?" "No, sire. I was setting off when Monsieur le Duc arrived." "Ah," which was followed by a fresh silence. "Whom did you see there?" A great many persons, said D'Artagnan coolly. The king perceived he was unwilling to speak. I have sent for you, monsieur le captain, to desire you to go and prepare my lodgings at Nantes. At Nantes? Cried D'Artagnan. In Bretagne. Yes, sire, it is in Bretagne. Will your majesty make so long a journey as to Nantes? The states are assembled there, replied the king. I have 2 demands to make of them. I wish to be there. When shall I set out? Said the captain. This evening. Tomorrow evening, for you must stand in need of rest. I have rested, sire. That is well. Then between this and tomorrow evening, when you please. D'Artagnan bowed as if to take his leave, but perceiving the king was very much embarrassed. Will you, majesty, said he, stepping 2 paces forward, take the court with you? Certainly I shall.
Everyone.
Then you, majesty, will doubtless want the musketeers? And the eye of the king sank beneath the penetrating glance of the captain. Take a brigade of them, replied Louis. Is that all? Has your majesty no other orders to give me? No, yes. I am all attention, sire. At the castle of Nantes, which I hear is very ill arranged, you will adopt the practice of placing musketeers at the door of each of the principal dignitaries I shall take with me. Of the principal? Yes. For instance, at the door of Monsieur de Leon? Yes. And that of Monsieur Letellier? Yes. And of Monsieur de Brion? Yes. And of Monsieur le Surintendant? Without doubt. Very well, sire. By tomorrow I shall have set out. Oh, yes, but one more word, Monsieur d'Artagnan. At Nantes you will meet with Monsieur le Duc de Gevres, captain of the guards. Be sure that your musketeers are placed before his guards arrive. Precedence always belongs to the first comer. Yes, sire. And if Monsieur de Gevres should question you? Question me, sire? It is likely that Monsieur de Gevres should question me. And the musketeer, turning cavalierly on his heel, disappeared. To Nantes, he said to himself as he descended from the stairs. Why did he not dare to say from thence to Belle Isle? As he reached the great gates, one of Monsieur Brienne's clerks came running after him, exclaiming, Monsieur d'Artagnan, I beg your pardon. What is the matter, Monsieur Ariste? The king has desired to give you this order. Upon your cash-box? Asked the musketeer. No, monsieur, on that of Monsieur Fouquet. D'Artagnan was surprised, but he took the order, which was in the king's own writing and was for 200 pistoles. What? He thought, after having politely thanked Monsieur Brienne's clerk. Monsieur Fouquet is to pay for the journey, then? Mordieu, that is a bit of pure Louis XI. Why was not this order on the chest of Monsieur Colbert? He would have paid it with such joy, and D'Artagnan, faithful to his principle of never letting an order at sight get cold, went straight to the house of Monsieur Fouquet to receive his 200 pistoles. Chapter 35. The Last Supper. The superintendent had no doubt received advice of the approaching departure, for he was giving a farewell dinner to his friends. From the bottom to the top of the house, the hurry of the servants bearing dishes and the diligence of the registres denoted an approaching change in offices and kitchen. D'Artagnan, with his order in his hand, presented himself at the offices. When he was told it was too late to pay cash, the chest was closed. He only replied, "On the king's service." The clerk, a little put out by the serious air of the captain, replied that was a very respectable reason, but that the customs of the house were respectable likewise, and that, in consequence, he begged the bearer to call again the next day. D'Artagnan asked if he could not see Monsieur Fouquet. The clerk replied that Monsieur le Superintendent did not interfere with such details, and rudely closed the outer door in the captain's face. But the latter had foreseen this stroke, and placed his boot between the door and door-case, so that the lock did not catch, and the clerk was still nose to nose with his interlocutor. This made him change his tone and say, with terrified politeness, "If monsieur wishes to speak with monsieur le surintendant, he must go to the antechambers. These are the officers where Monseigneur never comes." "Oh, very well. Where are they?" "On the other side of the court," said the clerk, delighted to be free. D'Artagnan crossed the court and fell in with a crowd of servants. "Monseigneur sees nobody at this hour," he was answered by a fellow carrying a vermeil dish in which were 3 pheasants and 12 quails. "Tell him," said the captain, laying hold of the servant by the end of his dish, "that I am Monsieur d'Artagnan, captain of His Majesty's Musketeers." The fellow uttered a cry of surprise and disappeared, D'Artagnan following him slowly. He arrived just in time to meet Monsieur Pelisson in the antechamber. The latter, a little pale, came hastily out of the dining room to learn what was the matter. D'Artagnan smiled. "There is nothing unpleasant, Monsieur Pellion, only a little order to receive money for." "Ah," said Fouquet's friend, breathing more freely, and he took the captain by the hand and, dragging him behind him, led him into the dining room, where a number of friends surrounded the surintendant, placed in the center and buried in the cushions of a fauteuil. There were assembled all the Epicureans who so lately at Vaux had done the honors of the mansion of wit and money in aid of Monsieur Fouquet. Joyous friends, for the most part faithful, they had not fled their protector at the approach of the storm, and in spite of the threatening heavens, in spite of the trembling earth, they remained there, smiling, cheerful, as devoted in misfortune as they had been in prosperity. On the left of the superintendent sat Madame de Belliere. On his right was Madame Fouquet. As if braving the laws of the world and putting all vulgar reasons of propriety to silence, the 2 protecting angels of this man united to offer, at the moment of the crisis, the support of their twinned arms. Madame de Belliere was pale, trembling, and full of respectful attentions for Madame la Surintendante, who, with one hand on her husband's, was looking anxiously towards the door by which Pelisson had gone out to bring D'Artagnan. The captain entered, at first full of courtesy, and afterwards of admiration, when, with his infallible glance, he had divined, as well as taken in the expression of every face. Fouquet raised himself up in his chair. "Pardon me, Monsieur d'Artagnan," said he, "if I did not myself receive you in coming in the king's name." And he pronounced the last words with a sort of melancholy firmness, which filled the hearts of all his friends with terror. "Monsieur, Monseigneur," replied D'Artagnan, "I only come to you in the king's name to demand payment for an order for 200 pistoles." The clouds passed from every brow but that of Fouquet, which still remained overcast. "Ah, then," said he, "perhaps you are also setting out for Nantes." "I do not know whether I am setting out, Monseigneur." "But," said Madame Fouquet, recovered from her fright, "you are not going so soon, Monsieur le Captain, as to not do us the honor to take a seat with us?" "Madame, I should esteem that a great honor done me, but I am so pressed for time that, you see, I have been obliged to permit myself to interrupt your repast to procure payment of my note." "The reply to which shall be gold," said Fouquet, making a sign to his intendant, who set out with the order D'Artagnan handed him. "Oh," said the latter, "I was not uneasy about the payment. The house is good." A painful smile passed over the pale features of Fouquet. "Are you in pain?" asked Madame Belliere. "Do you feel your attack coming on?" asked Madame Fouquet. "Neither, thank you both," said Fouquet. "Your attack?" said D'Artagnan in his turn. "Are you unwell, Monseigneur?" "I have a tertian fever which seized me at the feet at Vaux." "Caught cold in the grottos at night, perhaps?" No, nothing but agitation, that was all." "The too much heart you displayed in your reception of the king," said La Fontaine quietly, without suspicion that he was uttering a sacrilege. We cannot devote too much heart to the reception of our king, said Fouquet mildly to his poet. Monsieur meant to say the too great ardor, interpreted D'Artagnan, with perfect frankness and much amenity. The fact is, Monseigneur, that hospitality was never practiced as at Vaux. Madame Fouquet permitted her countenance to show clearly that if Fouquet had conducted himself well towards the king had hardly done the like to the minister. But D'Artagnan knew the terrible secret. He alone with Fouquet knew it. Those two men had not, one the courage to complain, the other the right to accuse. The captain, to whom the 200 pistoles were brought, was about to take his leave, when Fouquet, rising, took a glass of wine, and ordered one to be given to D'Artagnan. Monsieur, said he, to the health of the king, whatever may happen. And to your health, Monseigneur, whatever may happen, said D'Artagnan. He bowed, with these words of evil omen, to all the company, who rose as soon as they heard the sound of his spurs and boots at the bottom of the stairs. I, for a moment, thought that it was I and not my money he wanted, said Fouquet, endeavoring to laugh. You, cried his friends, and for what, in the name of heaven? No, do not deceive yourselves, my dear brothers and Epicurus, said the superintendent. I do not wish to make a comparison between the most humble sinner on the earth and the God we adore, but remember we have one day to his friends a repast, which is called the Last Supper, and which was nothing but a farewell dinner, like that which we are making at this moment. A painful cry of denial rose from all parts of the table. Shut the doors, said Fouquet, and the servants disappeared. My friends, continued Fouquet, lowering his voice, what was I formerly? What am I now? Consult amongst yourselves and reply. A man like me sinks when he does not continue to rise. What shall we say, then, when he really sinks? I have no more money, no more credit. I have no longer anything but powerful enemies and powerless friends. Quick, cried Pelisson. Since you explain yourself with such frankness, it is our duty to be frank likewise. Yes, you are ruined, yes, you are hastening to your ruin. Stop, and in the first place, what money have we left? 700,000 livres, said the intendant. Bread, murmured Madame Fouquet. Relays, said Pelisson, relays and fly. Whither? To Switzerland, to Savoy, but fly. If Monseigneur flies, said Madame Balliere, it will be said that he was guilty, was afraid. More than that, it will be said that I have carried away 20 millions with me. We will draw up memoirs to justify you, said La Fontaine. Fly. I will remain, said Fouquet. And besides, does not everything serve me? You have Belle Isle, cried the Abbé Fouquet. I am naturally going there when going to Nantes, replied the superintendent. Patience, then, patience. Before arriving at Nantes, what a distance, said Madame Fouquet. Yes, I know that well, replied Fouquet. But what is to be done there? The king summons me to the States. I know well it is for the purpose of ruining me, but to refuse to go would be to evince uneasiness. Well, I have discovered the means of reconciling everything, cried Pelisson. You are going to set out for Nantes. Fouquet looked at him with an air of surprise. But with friends, but in your own carriage as far as Orleans, in your own barge as far as Nantes, always ready to defend yourself. If you are attacked, to escape. If you are threatened, in fact, you will carry your money against all chances, and whilst flying you will only have obeyed the king. Then, reaching the sea, when you like, you will embark for Belle Isle, and from Belle Isle you will shoot out wherever it may please you, like the eagle that leaps into space when it has been driven from its eyrie. A general assent followed Pelisson's words. Yes, do so, Madame Fouquet said to her husband. Do so, said Madame Belliere. Do it, Do it, cried all his friends. I will do so, replied Fouquet. This very evening? In an hour? Instantly. With 700,000 livres. With 700,000 livres you can leave the foundation of another fortune, said the Abbé Fouquet. What is there to prevent our arming corsairs at Belle Isle? And if necessary, we will go and discover a new world, added La Fontaine, intoxicated with fresh projects and enthusiasm. A knock at the door interrupted the concert of joy and hope. A courier from the king, said the master of ceremonies. A profound silence immediately ensued, as if the message brought by this courier was nothing but a reply to all the projects given birth to a moment before. Everyone waited to see what the master would do. His brow was streaming with perspiration, and he was really suffering from his fever at that instant. He passed into his cabinet to receive the king's message. There prevailed, as we have said, such a silence in the chambers and throughout the attendance that from the dining-room could be heard the voice of Fouquet saying, "That is well, monsieur." This voice was, however, broken by fatigue and trembled with emotion. After an instant, Fouquet called Gourville, who crossed the gallery amidst the usual expectation. At length he himself reappeared among his guests, but it was no longer the same pale, spiritless countenance that they had beheld when he left them. From pale he had become livid, and from spiritless, annihilated. A breathing, living spectre, he advanced with his arms stretched out, his mouth parched, like a shade that comes to salute the friends of former days. On seeing him thus, everyone cried out, and everyone rushed towards Fouquet. The latter, looking at Pelisson, leaned upon his wife and pressed the icy hand of the Marquis de Belliere. "Well," he said in a voice which had nothing human in it. "What has happened? My God!" said someone to him. Fouquet opened his right hand, which was clenched but glistening with perspiration, and displayed a paper upon which Pelisson cast a terrified glance. He read the following lines, written by the king's hand. "Dear and well-beloved Monsieur Fouquet, give us upon that which you have left of ours the sum of 700,000 livres, of which we stand in need to prepare for our departure. And as we know your health is not good, we pray God to restore you and have you in his holy keeping. Louis." The present letter is to serve as a receipt. A murmur of terror circulated through the apartment. "Well," cried Pelisson in his turn, "have you received that letter?" "Received it, yes." "What will you do, then?" "Nothing, since I have received it." "But—" "If I have received it, Pelisson, I have paid it," said the superintendent with a simplicity that went to the heart of all present. "You have paid it!" cried Madame Fouquet. "Then we are ruined." "Come, come, no useless words," interrupted Pelisson. "Next to money, life. Monseigneur, to horse, to horse." "What? Leave us at once," cried both the women, with wild with grief. Monseigneur, in saving yourself, you save us all. To horse." "But he cannot hold himself on. Look at him." "Oh, if he takes time to reflect," said the intrepid Pelisson. "He is right," murmured Fouquet. "Monseigneur, Monseigneur!" cried Gourville, rushing up the stairs 4 steps at once. "Monseigneur!" "Well, what?" "I escort, as you desired, the king's courier with the money." "Yes. Well, when I arrived at the Palais Royal, I saw—" "Take breath, my poor friend, take breath. You are suffocating." "What did you see?" cried the impatient friends. "I saw the musketeers mounting on horseback," said Gourville. "There, then," cried every voice at once. "There, then, is there an instant to be lost?" Madame Fouquet rushed downstairs, calling for her horses. Madame de Belliere flew after her, catching her in her arms and saying, "Madame, in the name of his safety, do not betray anything, do not manifest alarm." Pelisson ran to give the horses put to the carriage. And in the meantime Gorville gathered in his hat all that the weeping friends were able to throw into it of gold and silver, the last offering, the pious alms made to misery by poverty. The surintendant, dragged along by some, carried by others, was shut up in his carriage. Gorville took the reins and mounted the box. Pelisson supported Madame Fouquet, who had fainted. Madame Belliere had more strength and was well paid for it. She received Fouquet's last kiss. Pelisson easily explained this precipitate departure by saying that an order from the king had summoned the minister to Nantes. Chapter 36. In Monsieur Colbert's carriage. As Gorville had seen, the king's musketeers were mounting and following their captain. The latter, who did not like to be confined in his proceedings, left his brigade under the orders of a lieutenant and set off on post horses, recommending his men to use all diligence. However rapidly they might travel, they could not arrive before him. He had time, in passing along the Rue de Petits Champs, to see something which afforded him plenty of food for thought and conjecture. He saw Monsieur Colbert coming out of his house to get into his carriage, which was stationed before the door. In this carriage D'Artagnan perceived the hoods of two women, and being rather curious, he wished to know the names of the ladies hid beneath those hoods. To get a glimpse at them, for they kept themselves carefully covered up, he urged his horse so near the carriage that he drove him up against the step with such force as to shake everything containing and contained. The terrified women uttered, with the one a faint cry, by which D'Artagnan recognized a young woman, the other an imprecation, in which he recognized the vigor and aplomb that half a century bestows. The hoods were thrown back. One of the women was Madame Vanel, the other the Duchess de Chevreuse. D'Artagnan's eyes were quicker than those of the ladies. He had seen and known them, whilst they did not recognize him. And as they laughed at their fright, passing each other's hands, said D'Artagnan, "The old Duchess is no more inaccessible to friendship than formerly, she paying her court to the mistress of Monsieur Colbert. Poor Monsieur Fouquet, that presages you nothing good." He rode on. Monsieur Colbert got into his carriage, and the distinguished trio commenced a sufficiently slow pilgrimage toward the wood of Vincennes. Madame Chevreuse set down Madame Vanel at her husband's house, and, left alone with Monsieur Colbert, chatted upon affairs whilst continuing her ride. She had an inexhaustible fund of conversation, that dear Duchess, and as she always talked for the ill of others, though ever with a view to her own good, her conversation amused her interlocutor, and did not fail to leave a favorable impression. She taught Colbert, who, poor man, was ignorant of the fact, how great a minister he was, and how Fouquet would soon become a cipher. She promised to rally around him when he should become superintendent, and all the old nobility of the kingdom, and questioned him as to the preponderance it would be proper to allow La Valliere. She praised him, she blamed him, she bewildered him. She showed him the secret of so many secrets that for a moment Colbert thought he was doing business with the devil. She proved to him that she held in her hand the Colbert of today as she held the Fouquet of yesterday, and as he asked her very simply the reason of her hatred for the surintendant. "Why do you yourself hate him?" said she. "Madame, in politics," replied he, "the differences of system oft bring about dissensions between men. Monsieur Fouquet always appeared to me to practice a system opposed to the true interests of the king." She interrupted him. "I will say no more to you about Monsieur Fouquet. The journey the king is about to make to Nantes will give a good account of him. Monsieur Fouquet, for me, is a man gone by, and for you also." Colbert made no reply. "On his return from Nantes," continued the Duchess, "the king, who is only anxious for a pretext, will find that the States have not behaved well, that they have made too few sacrifices. The States will say that the imposts are too heavy, and that the surintendant has ruined them. The king will lay all the blame on Monsieur Fouquet, and then—" "And then?" said Colbert. Oh, he will be disgraced. Is that not your opinion? Colbert darted a glance at the Duchess, which plainly said, If Monsieur Fouquet be only disgraced, you will not be the cause of it. Your place, Monsieur Fouquet, Monsieur Colbert, the Duchess hastened to say, must be a high place. Do you perceive anyone between the king and yourself after the fall of Monsieur Fouquet? I do not understand, said he. You will understand. To what does your ambition aspire? I have none. It was useless, then, to overthrow the superintendent, Monsieur Colbert. It was idle. I had the honor to tell you, madame. Oh, yes, I know all about the interest of the king, but, if you please, we will speak of your own. Mine, that is to say, the affairs of his majesty. In short, you are you not endeavoring to ruin Monsieur Fouquet? Answer without evasion. Madame, I ruin nobody. I am endeavoring to comprehend, then, why you purchased from me the letters of Monsieur Mazarin concerning Monsieur Fouquet. Neither can I convince you why you have laid those letters before the king. Colbert, half stupefied, looked at the Duchess with an air of constraint. Madame, said he, I can less easily conceive how you, who received the money, can reproach me on that head. That is, said the old Duchess, because we must will that which we wish for, unless we are not able to obtain what we wish. Will, said Colbert, quite confounded by such hoarse logic. You are not able. Haine, speak. I am not able, I allow, to destroy certain influences near the king. That fight in favor of Monsieur Fouquet? What are they? Stop. Let me help you. Do, madame. La Valliere? Oh, very little influence, no knowledge of business, and small means. Monsieur Fouquet has paid his court to her. To defend him would be to accuse herself, would it not? I think it would. There is still another influence. What do you say to that? It is considerable. The Queen Mother, perhaps? Her Majesty, the Queen Mother, has a weakness for Monsieur Fouquet, very prejudicial to her son. Never believe that, said the old Duchess, smiling. Oh, said Colbert with incredulity, I have often experienced it. Formerly? Very recently, madame, at Vaux. It was she who prevented the king from having Monsieur Fouquet arrested. People do not forever entertain the same opinions, my dear monsieur. That which the queen may have wished recently, she would not wish, perhaps, today. And why not? Said Colbert, astonished. Oh, the reason is of very little consequence. On the contrary, I think it is of great consequence, for if I were certain of not displeasing her Majesty, the Queen Mother, my scruples would be all removed. Well, have you never heard talk of a certain secret? A secret? Call it what you like. In short, the Queen Mother has conceived a bitter hatred for all those who have participated, in one fashion or another, in the discovery of this secret, and Monsieur Fouquet, I believe, is one of these. Then, said Colbert, we may be sure of the assent of the Queen Mother? I have just left Her Majesty, and she assures me so. So be it, then, madame. But there is something further. Do you happen to know a man who was the intimate friend of Monsieur Fouquet? Monsieur d'Herblay, a bishop, I believe? Bishop of Vannes? Well, this Monsieur d'Herblay, who also know the secret, the Queen Mother is pursuing with the utmost rancor. Indeed, so hotly pursued that if he were dead she would not be satisfied with anything less than his head. To satisfy her he would never speak again. And is that the desire of the Queen Mother? An order is given for it. This Monsieur d'Herblay shall be sought for, madame. Oh, it is well known where he is. Colbert looked at the Duchess. Say where, madame. He is at Belle Isle in Mer. At the residence of Monsieur Fouquet? At the residence of Monsieur Fouquet. He shall be taken. It was now the Duchess's turn to smile. Do not fancy the capture so easy, said she. Do not promise it so lightly. Why not, madame? Because Monsieur d'Herblay is not one of those people who can be taken when and where you please. He is a rebel, then? Oh, Monsieur Colbert, we have passed all our lives in making rebels, and yet you see plainly that so far from being taken, we take others. Colbert fixed upon the old Duchess one of those fierce looks of which no words can convey the expression, accompanied by a firmness not altogether wanting in grandeur. The times are gone, said he, in which subjects gained duchies by making war against the King of France. If Monsieur d'Herblay conspires, he will perish on the scaffold. That will give, or will not give, pleasure to his enemies, a matter, by the way, of little importance to us. And this us, a strange word in the mouth of Colbert, made the Duchess thoughtful for a moment. She caught herself reckoning inwardly with this man. Colbert had regained his superior in the conversation, and he meant to keep it. "You ask me, madame," he said, "to have this Monsieur d'Herblay arrested?" I ask you of nothing of the kind." "I thought you did, madame, but as I have been mistaken, we will leave him alone. The king has said nothing about him." The Duchess bit her nails. "Besides," continued Colbert, "what a poor capture would this bishop be! A bishop game for a king? No, 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 I will not even take the slightest notice of him." The hatred of the Duchess now discovered itself. "Game for a woman," said she. "Is not the Queen a woman? If she wishes Monsieur d'Herblay arrested, she has her reasons. Besides, is not Monsieur d'Herblay the friend of him who is doomed to fall?" "Oh, never mind that," said Colbert. "This man shall be spared if he is not the enemy of the king. Is that displeasing to you?" "I say nothing." "Yes, you wish to see him in prison, in the Bastille, for instance." "I believe a secret better concealed behind the walls of the Bastille than those of Belle Isle." "I will speak to the king about it. He will clear up the point." "And whilst waiting for that enlightenment, Monsieur l'Evêque de Vannes will have escaped. I would do so." "Escaped he, and whither shall he escape? Escape is ours, if in will, if not in fact." "He will always find an asylum, monsieur. It is evident you know nothing of the man you have to do with. You do not know d'Herblay, you do not know Aramis. He was one of those 4 musketeers who, under the late king, made Cardinal de Richelieu tremble, and who, during the Regency, gave so much trouble to Monseigneur Mazarin." "But, madame, what can he do unless he has a kingdom to back him?" "He has one, monsieur." "A kingdom, he, what, Monsieur d'Herblay?" "I repeat to you, monsieur, that if he wants a kingdom, he either has it or will have it." "Well, as you are so earnest that this rebel should not escape, madame, I promise you he shall not escape." "Belle Isle is fortified, Monsieur Colbert, and fortified by him." "If Belle Isle were also defended by him, Belle Isle is not impregnable, and if Monsieur l'Evêque de Vannes is shut up in Belle Isle, well, madame, the place shall be besieged, and he will be taken." "You may be very certain, monsieur, that the zeal you display in the interest of the Queen Mother will please Her Majesty mightily, and you will be magnificently rewarded. But what shall I tell her of your projects respecting this man?" "That when once taken, he shall be shut up in a fortress from which her secret shall never escape." "Very well, Monsieur Colbert, and we may say that, dating from this instant, we have formed a solid alliance. That is, you and I, and that I am absolutely at your service." "It is I, madame, who place myself at yours. This Chevalier d'Herblay is a kind of Spanish spy, is he not?" "Much more. A secret ambassador? Higher still." "Stop. King Philip III of Spain is a bigot. He is, perhaps, confessor of Philip III." "You must go higher even than that." "Mordieu!" cried Colbert, who forgot himself so far as to swear in the presence of this great lady, of this old friend of the Queen Mother. "He must then be the general of the Jesuits." "I believe you have guessed it at last," replied the Duchess. "Ah, then, madame, this man will ruin us all if we do not ruin him, and we must make haste, too." "Such was my opinion, monsieur, but I did not dare to give it to you." "And it was lucky for us he attacked the throne and not us." "But mark this well, Monsieur Colbert. Monsieur d'Herblay is never discouraged. If he has missed one blow, he will be sure to make another. He will begin again if he has allowed an opportunity to escape of making a king for himself. Sooner or later he will make another, of whom, as to a certainty, you will not be prime minister. Colbert knitted his brow with a menacing expression. I feel assured that a prison will settle this affair for us, madame, in a manner satisfactory for both. The Duchess smiled again. Oh, if you knew, said she, how many times Aramis has got out of prison. Oh, replied Colbert, we will take care of that. Take care that he shall not get out this time. But you were not attending to what I said to you just now. Do you remember that Aramis was one of the 4 invincibles whom Richelieu so dreaded, and at that period the 4 musketeers were not in possession of that which they have now, money and experience? Colbert bit his lips. We will renounce the idea of the prison, said he in a lower tone. We will find a little retreat from which the invincible cannot possibly escape. That was well spoken, our ally, replied the Duchess, but it is getting late. Had we not better return? The more willingly, madame, from my having my preparations to make for setting out with the king. To Paris, cried the Duchess to the coachman. And the carriage returned towards the Faubourg Saint-Antoine after the conclusion of the treaty that gave death to the last friend of Fouquet, the last defender of Belle Isle, and the former friend of Marie Michon, the new foe of the old Duchess.